All right, let's do it. Hello, everyone. I just thought that I would show you some of my recent reads, I guess, that I've been thinking about lately. Um, I'm currently on my break, so I thought, why not start a video? Start a kind of visual diary, and I'm just seeing I'm kind of all messed up. Okay, let's do it. So, I'll just go in order. One of the first books I read this year was Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar. Um, this is my mother's copy. I had to read this for a class I was attending earlier in the year, which was focusing on kind of autobiography and confessional writing. Obviously, Plath is a confessional poet. And there's lots of discourse actually about the bell jar and how it's not necessarily, it shouldn't necessarily be considered an autobiography. That kind of takes away from Plath's surrealist and ironic style. With that being said, it was definitely not my favorite book. I thought it was quite easy to read, quite easy to get through, but I found it to be slightly problematic in certain areas. I think of a quote by Frantz Fanon, who states that sometimes black bodies occupy a zone of non-being, and I think that is certainly the case in the bell jar, as in certain scenarios, Plath kind of uses the racial other as a way to symbolize Esther's alienation. But besides that, I found it to be quite enjoyable and quite interesting in its kind of take on the McCarthy late 1950s, 1960s, I think, American context. Yeah, found it to be pretty good. So that was The Bell Jar. After that, I finally wanted to tackle a Virginia Woolf, and I started with To the Lighthouse. So the reason why, this is also my mom's copy, the reason why I chose to do To the Lighthouse was because in my first year of university, I got assigned it in an English class, a class which I went on to drop basically 3 weeks in. So I never got to read it. So now basically 2 years later, 3 years later, I guess, I don't know, 2 years later, it was kind of in the back of my head, like gnawing. So I wanted to read it. And good thing I did, because it turned out to be one of my favorite books ever. I think on my copy there's a kind of in the introduction at least, or on the back, I can't remember, there was a kind of review by someone who said that Woolf is able to perfectly encapture these kind of little moments between humans that we think of as insignificant within conversation, and she just kind of embellishes them with such beauty and such time and such description that I just think is kind of phenomenal. So we have To the Lighthouse. I just completely fell in love with this book. I mean, I would kind of read it before class, and I know it's kind of cliche to say, especially with Woolf, but it was really as if I was dipping into a body of water. I'd say that was the reading experience. Really, really amazing. I don't know. Of course it is. It's Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse. It's going to be amazing, but really touched me in a certain way. Okay. But then we have Orlando by Virginia Woolf. I was so struck by Virginia Woolf that I thought that I wanted to immediately go into a second book, and I had heard so much about Orlando, about this kind of gender change, this kind of temporal figure of Orlando. I thought that was quite interesting. As you can see, oh, I haven't got my bookmark in, but I didn't finish it. And I'll tell you why. So, I'm someone who's very interested in gender, and when you look up I'm interested in gender and the body itself, but when you look up gender body fiction into a search engine or something, Orlando is all you see, right? So I was all amped for Orlando, and I'm reading it, and I just don't care. I just don't care about Orlando that much. I read the introduction, and I thought that was quite interesting, talking about how it's essentially a kind of love letter to one of Virginia Woolf's lovers slash friends slash another writer, who was a woman, Orlando is kind of her trying to encapsulate this person within a novel, which I found to be quite interesting. I just think that the gender stuff in there was a little shallow, and also in the introduction, I think Woolf described it as a so-called writer's holiday for her, as she wrote it after To the Lighthouse, where To the Lighthouse was about kind of her dealing with her feelings about her mother, and it was a very therapeutic, very internal experience, where Orlando was kind of for her a little bit of like a holiday, as she describes, and I could kind of feel that. I'm not so. This is just my opinion, you know. I know lots of people love Orlando. I found it to be kind of interesting in terms of time, in terms of this kind of queer, gender changing figure, not only changing their body but also distorting how time works and how time affects them. That was probably more interesting to me than the gender aspects, to be honest. And I honestly didn't even finish it because I was reading it and I was really close to the end and I was just like, I don't really care. Anyway, that's probably my fault. Yeah. Okay. I actually think I've gone out of order, but that's all right. Before Orlando, I read J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye, which I'm sure you guys have no idea what that book is. But anyway. Now, this book is a book that I think I would have loved when I was 16, 17, right? When I was extremely angsty. And I still am very angsty, don't get me wrong, but this is an angsty book for angsty teens. It's pretty great though. I mean, I love these kind of books where these characters are kind of like out of place in their life, and so they go to the city. They go away from their family home, and they kind of seek salvation in the dark city and just walking from place to place to place, which I think is what happens in this book. In that way, it's kind of a queer story, if you want to use that word, but I thought it was good. Really easy to read, really fun to read. Yeah, the whole notion of the phony adult world would have rung truer to me maybe a couple of years ago. Now that I've joined that phony adult world, I'm a little more sympathetic. Yeah, but still a really enjoyable read, really good writer. Yeah, Catcher in the Rye. I don't really know what to say about this book because it's The Catcher in the Rye. You know what I mean? Everyone knows it. Everyone knows all these books, but anyway. Okay. Then we've got one of my favorites that I've read this year, Dubliners by James Joyce. So, funny story about this copy. I got this copy for my friend who was overseas as a little coming home gift. And then turns out he'd read it. So, ended up on my bookshelf, didn't really think about it. But my grandma is a massive James Joyce fan. Especially Ulysses. So I've had these conversations with her about Joyce, and I've never read him. I'm not a very good reader. I find reading quite hard. And so Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake and stuff, that's a little out of my wheelhouse for now, maybe later. But Dublin is, early in his career, short stories about Dublin. I love Dublin. Who doesn't like Dublin? I've never been, but you know what I mean? Seems like everyone likes Ireland now. It's kind of captured everyone's hearts. Um, so I read Dubliners. Wow. It's really, really quite something. Just story after story of these extremely complex and nuanced kind of pictures of a city that Joyce seemingly has a kind of infatuation for, but also almost a contempt for. Um, it's really amazing how he kind of captures this feeling that I get here in Australia a little bit, where people are kind of so nostalgic for a past, so nostalgic that they kind of refuse to live and they kind of become, as the last story is called, the dead. And they're just kind of living in their past and living in the traditions of the past, which are now being kind of, even those traditions are being kind of, you know, poisoned by uh, like money and shallowness and stuff like that. So, if you guys are intimidated by Joyce like I am, I would read this. It's really amazing. Very melancholy, very dark, but really touching too. It's got a real heart to it. Um, yeah, I've never been to Dublin, but it really paints a real picture of a real place, if that rings true at all or makes sense at all. Okay, then I revisited Kafka. This is just a Penguin classic, Metamorphosis and Other Stories. Sorry, I'm not really used to this. Okay, I got this book a long time ago. Not a long time ago, but literally like a year ago, so not long ago. I got it to read Metamorphosis, essentially, because, it's one of those things you should read, I guess. Read Metamorphosis, kind of read it, not even thinking, just read it, right? And then it's one of those things which I find with really good stories is when you read it, or maybe for me, I read it and I don't even think about it. I just read it, and then I'm like, all right, cool, it's done. And then like a couple weeks later, a couple months later, a couple 6 months later, it's like an earworm. You just can't get it out of your head. And you just keep thinking about it, and you keep thinking about Gregor and his existence and who he is and his family and that story. Just amazing. So I just picked it up because I was waiting at the doctor, and I was like, I'll just read another story from there. So I read The Judgment, which I haven't quite got yet. I just didn't quite get it. So I read it. I didn't really get it. It was one of his earlier stories. So if you guys have any thoughts about it, I don't know. I read it and I didn't really get it, but we'll see. Maybe I'll read it again and I'll kind of think about it more and I'll do more research, because there was something to it. And I haven't grasped it yet. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Okay. Finally, I will just talk about Judith Butler, who I haven't really started reading this year, but I guess I've started properly reading this year. I did a philosophy of gender class, which was not mostly, I guess, like the first half was mostly covering Judith Butler, and of course this is Gender Trouble. This is like a canonical if you want to use a canon for gender studies in the West. And I've read bits and pieces of Gender Trouble before, just in university. I actually was not good, and I would like just kind of go in and out and just try and fish for quotes, which is not good, but anyway. So last couple months I've actually read it, and what am I supposed to say about gender trouble? It's how I choose to think about gender now, up to a certain point, and it's how I choose to think about bodies now. And I don't know, I don't really feel qualified to explain it, but I guess I could offer some advice when reading it. It's a very hard book. I would make use of it being an extremely famous and canonical gender book, and I would use secondary literature, essentially. And yeah, because the only way that I cracked it was through a Routledge Thinkers Judith Butler. I can't remember the author, but if you look up Routledge Thinkers Judith Butler, that book is really good if you want to learn the concepts. But what I will say is just don't let it don't give up easily. Judith Butler is a thinker like Derrida who thinks about language in a very theoretical way and thinks about how we use language in a very purposeful way. So, which means that they can't really convey their ideas through normative language as they are kind of theorizing about normative language. Anyway, we'll talk about this in another video, I think, when I get my thoughts more formulated. Then we've got Judith Butler's most recent book, 2024, Who's Afraid of Gender. This is a very approachable book. I haven't read all of it. I've read various chapters, but it's essentially it's more political than theoretical. Butler has kind of gone away from really pure gender philosophy and stuff like that, and this is meant to be way more approachable and is more approachable, but it has a different focus. It's essentially about the kind of anti-gender, I'll use the word populism, of our age, as we can see in, Trump's America and in the TERFs of the UK, different parts of the world, and in the Vatican as well. It's a very, very good explanation of this kind of anti-gender ideology, which they describe as mixed up in this kind of phantasm of a whole notion of different things where gender comes to become like a monolith, an amalgamation of all these kind of, I would say, neoliberal fears about a kind of white male displacement in society. Yeah. If you guys want me to talk about this more, I can, of course. Okay, cool. With that, I'll be done.